Welcome to Kevin Richards VIPs. I am on the beautiful waterfront of downtown Barrie. It's a little bit windy, but we're going to get through this as I'm sitting with a really good old friend, Rich Bailey. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we're in your beautiful backyard, and it's funny because the weather in Barrie, if you don't like it, just give it a minute, right? Like it tends to be jumping around today, so we'll get through this though, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you for taking the time to meet with me. There's so much going on. A lot of things going on with George Floyd, and we're going to get to some of that and unpack that later. But I want to talk to you about growing up in Barrie and where you're from. So tell me a little bit about where you're from.
So back in 1989, my parents moved from Toronto, and they said to me, "Hey, we're going to move up to Barrie." So, we got off the 400 and came down Bayfield Street, and they said, "This is downtown Barrie." So I was like, it was definitely different from Toronto. And then we continued on out Highway 90 to a small little town called Angus.
Yeah.
And that's actually been living in Angus since 1989, and then finally migrated to Barrie as an adult.
Yep. Both have grown like crazy.
Yeah, and then mid-90s, late 90s, and just have never left. I love it.
Cool. So where did you go to school? Did you go to school in Toronto or in Barrie?
So went to Barrie North, which had I had a great high school career, loved it, and then after that, I graduated from Barrie North, and I went to a small university called Bishop's. It's just outside of Montreal in Quebec, near Sherbrooke. And got a business degree there, economic minor, and had a great experience because I played sports there as well, and great time.
Now, what did you notice when you came up to Barrie? Was there ever a this isn't going to be an all-black show about being black, but we are going to talk about that quite a bit because that's one of the focuses I really wanted to, get your attention on and opinions on today. So, did you notice anything when you came to Barrie? Because when I was little, probably 50% of the black people in Barrie lived in my community, in my area of Barrie. We had some really amazing people that were just the coolest, or even our mailman was black, and they were the coolest people, but we never really identified them as our black friends. They were just our friends, right? We never really got into that. But did you notice a difference when you came up to Barrie? Did you notice a real difference in the population?
Well, definitely. I went to, I was in Toronto and going to school from grade 6 because we migrated back from Calgary. Yeah. And so, grade 6, grade 7, I was living in Toronto.
Yeah.
Back then, even then, Toronto was very multicultural. So my school had whites, blacks, Indians, Asians, everything like that. I remember my friends from back then.
Sure.
But now you fast forward, and a couple of years later, you end up, and I'm living in Angus.
Yeah.
And it was very different. We were one of 3 black families in Angus at the time.
Wow.
Going to school at North, there was, counting back, there was, I think 5 black kids at the school at the time. So you definitely noticed it, and we also were noticed as well, So it was definitely visible, for sure.
Did you find that there was anything that, came across, even before you came up to Barrie, did your family say anything about, okay, you might need to expect some changes or anything like that? Because I know as a kid, in Barrie, I'll admit, I was a white kid. I didn't know much about black people, didn't know much about black history or black anything other than what maybe you saw on a documentary called Roots or things like that. And, I think a lot of kids maybe even dropped the N-bomb without ever knowing what it really meant. People said and did stupid things. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We were taught to count, who's on our team by doing what was eventually really a racist thing that we just didn't know. There was ignorance, right? Now it was one potato, two potato. But, people did racist things or said racist things without realizing it or hurting people, so they thought, because that's just what we did. We were taught things differently growing up. Did you feel that maybe you were taught, to expect things? Were you ever taught to expect racism?
My parents, growing up in Calgary from 4 years old to 10 when I made it back, Calgary was very behind. But again, I was the youngest of 6 brothers. Now the youngest. There's a total of 7 boys and 1 sister, and I was sheltered. And what I realized, fast forwarding to when I was 24 years old, my parents and my brothers did a very good job with I stayed within a small circle of trust. Did I see it? Yes. I remember probably the first month living in Angus, walking down the street, being called the N-word, and that being,
Yeah.
my parents did do a good job of at least teaching me that if I came into situations, how to manage it, how to handle it, how to not get angry, what is expected of myself and in believing in myself. So,
Yeah.
I ran into it definitely in Angus, and then I remember high school was great as well because, with playing sports, I was guarded. I played
Yeah.
basketball, and those 12 guys on my team, they were my friends, and, I was never sheltered from it, or I was sheltered from it. I remember my basketball coach, which is like a second father to me. His name's John Knapp. He said something to me. He said, this town is a little bit backwards, and he made me very aware of how I needed to manage myself.
Yeah.
But he was great at allowing me to understand that I was black as well, but that he didn't really see color. He saw me as a person.
And that's great.
Yeah.
Now, and that's sort of a funny thing that it kind of goes both ways. To just not see you as, Rich, my black, good-looking friend that I've known for a long time, right? You're Rich Bailey, and you're my friend. I never identify you as Rich, the black, good-looking guy. You're just Rich, the good-looking guy, right? So, and dynamic entrepreneur type, right? You're Rich. Is it wrong for me to say I don't recognize you as black, or am I supposed to recognize you as black? Because I think people who say that they're colorblind are missing the point. We should see our other colors and see the other diversities, but embrace it and respect it, not make it, a wall between us.
I think everyone sees color.
Well, we have to.
all do. We all
Yeah.
see color. We have eyes, I think with how you're raised and where seeing color and how you react, you understand that, we all are humans.
Mm-hmm.
We all are of the same genetic, makeup, blood. And
Yeah.
so how you handle yourself after realizing, hey, I'm speaking to a black guy or a white guy or an Indian guy, we're all just people.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to parenting, the people that parent their kids properly,
Yeah.
and you were parented properly, I think you don't see color.
Yeah.
You understand it's there, but you understand it's a person you're dealing with.
If I had said anything racist in front of my parents, they would have tanned my butt for doing it.
Absolutely.
And that's the way it should be. And, funny story, my son was in class with his friend, and he said, "Can you hand me the skin-colored pencil crayon?" Mm-hmm. Well, his black friend slid him a brown pencil crayon, right? Because when we were kids, everybody fought for the pink pencil crayon because we didn't have a lot of black kids.
Yeah.
So there was always the short pink kind of pencil color. It was called flesh, right?
That's right.
And so, but the brown pencil crayon was never ever sharpened in some classes,
Yeah.
right? But so the kids slid across, and my son just kind of looked up and smiled because it's his best friend.
Yeah.
And he's like, and they kind of had a little giggle about it. But it's funny. Like even Crayola now makes a box of crayons of like 50 different colors of skin color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that there is a distinction for you and your children now? Because you're a dad and a very proud dad, and you got another one on the way, which is, congratulations.
Thank you,
right?
thank you.
Your family's growing. And so you've got this beautiful family. Do you ever feel that, you've got an issue with the color of your wife or the color of your children and people maybe saying things, or do you ever fear for their, a concern?
That's a very loaded question. So the answer is, it's not across the board yes, but, even when in my previous relationships and with my wife now, my wife's Italian, I'm the first black person she's ever dated, and now we're married.
Yeah.
I would say because of growing up here in high school, and that when you're dating, and I've dated most white women being in the area that I am, I'd always say, hey, you're going to notice people looking at us. And my girlfriends would be like, what? What do you mean? Mm-hmm. People notice interracial couples. People, people knew that it was a white guy and a black girl.
Sure.
Or a black guy and a white girl.
Yeah.
Having kids, I've sat down with my kids and I've said to them, even though, they're a genetic makeup of half me and half their mother being white, they're still going to always be identified as being black. And so, you know, again, where my kids live, the school they go to, I think the community does a very good job. That my kids, I've asked them, has anyone ever said, you know, the N-word to you? And, you know, they're 13. You know, my son is 12 on Saturday or on Sunday, and then I have my youngest is 9. They've all said no, and I think that is great. I think, you know, we as parents have put them into a situation where we've minimized that risk for them. So, so far it's been great.
Yeah.
They are going to come into encounter with it at some time, and I think it's up to us as parents to teach them how to handle that, which we have.
Yeah, and that takes strength and diversity, and honestly, I can see the concern, and it's unfortunate that there should ever be that concern. But again, the world is the world, right? I've noticed at times people will say, you know, how concerned they are, or how, you know, oh, we support you. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with people saying that they support you, or do you feel that maybe it's being overblown, or is it a good thing?
With what's happening?
Well, with what's happening, or people saying that they're concerned for you or concerned for black people. Do you feel that, you know, maybe some of it's being overblown? Because there are people who will say that, oh, this Black Lives Matter, it's just too much. And that frustrates me, because you know what, it's been a long time coming, and we shouldn't have to do this. It's been, you know, hundreds of years that this has been going on, or thousands of years, really.
So, you know, and that's a great question. Floyd sparked a very quiet fire that's been brewing for hundreds of years.
Sure.
You know, slavery was abolished in 1965, I think, in the U.S., and 1865 in the U.S. and 1834 in Canada. It actually was before.
Yeah.
You know, segregation ended, I think, 1965, and where the world has come is it has come far. It's still, you're talking to a guy that has had many ups and many downs.
Well, you've been an entrepreneur for a long time.
You can always listen. I could be the guy that has a chip on the shoulder that says it's based on color.
Yeah.
Do I think what's going on is important? Yes. You know, you look at Martin Luther King. You know, he died in 1968, but he always. I think back to how would he view this? Mm-hmm. You know, he was a man that he was so powerful with gathering people, but trying to gather people on a non-violence platform. It was about non-violence.
Yeah.
So with what's going on today, I think it's great. I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it needs to happen, not only for black people, but for many different for many different cultures.
Absolutely.
The violence I don't support.
No. Well, nobody does.
But the message is very important. And, you know, someone recently asked me how long do they think it'll take to change for it to be kind of a norm across the platforms. Well, I said 100 years.
Yeah.
And why I said 100 years was based on the fact that it's all up to parenting. It's all, you know, I used to teach at as an assistant teacher at Maple Grove School.
Maple Grove, over,
Maple
yeah.
Grove.
On
so
Grove
in grade
Street.
11,
Yeah.
I did an assistant teaching thing at Maple Grove, and this kid, this little guy, he was in about maybe 6 years old.
Yeah.
In the middle of the hallway, he calls me the N-word. The teachers were just shocked.
They'd be floored.
They're floored. And I didn't get upset, because what I realized was, one, that child,
he doesn't even know what it means.
He doesn't even know what it means. And
Yeah.
that's, you know, it came back down to parenting, so I didn't get upset. It's out there. I think it's good to what is happening for everyone to realize that there needs to be a change. There needs to be a different way to start educating our friends, our families, the kids that we are raising, you know, our friends. I've had people reach out to me saying, hey, you know what, I didn't realize this. So I think positive will come from it.
Yeah, and it's funny because you touched on that one part briefly about the riots and that sort of thing. And people need to realize it's a lot of people who have no reason to be a part of that protest who are doing the rioting. That has nothing to do with the actual protest. There are so many beautiful, peaceful protests going on and a beautiful message is being laid out that the riots sour that. And it's unfortunate, but people need to realize it has nothing to do with what's going on. Mm-hmm. It might be a ripple effect, but it had nothing to do with the original protest. And so, on that, would you say that in Barrie, and in the community, because you spent some time managing some businesses in Toronto and stuff as well too.
Yep.
Did you ever really feel a real pressure, or did you ever feel that anybody was sort of in a power spot of influence that might have bullied you or pushed you around a little bit? Like, I know you went through some family issues, you've been through some work issues, business issues.
So yes, back in 1999, I opened up my first cafe/clothing store.
I loved it.
Frequency Boutique, beside the Queens.
Yeah. I shopped there.
Because I was used to, again, being sheltered with my basketball friends, university, playing football, that group of 80 guys. When I came back in 1999 and opened up my first business, it was heartbreaking because now it was just Rich Bailey. It was Richard Bailey out there on his own. People walking into the store, seeing a black person, turning away and walking up. The first time I'm like, maybe they just didn't like, but when it happened numerous times, that was really sad.
Wow.
I went through, a pretty high conflict divorce, which, I'm pretty private about, but I experienced it there as well. I experienced it there, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I understand
with
that.
Being an interracial couple, and Barrie still being, it's come a far way, but it still has a long way to go.
Well, I understand that.
You're viewed.
Yeah.
You're in any divorce, you're behind the gun. Sometimes I feel as a male, but
there's a certain leverage and a certain amount of influence.
Yep.
And I know there's certain things. So when I'm saying that I get that, I don't mean that I get it. Like, I be as empathetic as I can without actually, because I've never been there, and never had that experience. But I've been through divorce, and any sort of influence or any sort of nudge in any direction, especially if somebody is a closed-minded judge, lawyer, whatever, or ex-partner, a lot of things can be used as a leverage or in a bullying tactic, and that's painful.
Yeah, and I really want to clarify that.
Yeah.
The Barrie court system, overall great.
Yeah.
Lawyers can be difficult. Mm-hmm. So, I leave it at that.
Well, and to be true of that, let's touch on that term, bad apples. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, Chris Rock said it brilliantly. He talked about bad apples, and he said, cops, there's always some bad apples. He goes, I had a bad apple once. It was a bit tart. It didn't try to choke me, right? And he said, there's other jobs that you can't have bad apples. Yeah. Pilots, you can't have a bad apple. Right?
No, you can't.
So there shouldn't be bad apples. There shouldn't be any bad apples. And that being said, it's not about Blue Lives Matter and White Lives Matter and All Lives Matter and, bad apples. Let's get the police the help they need. Let's get everybody the help they need. But right now, this focus, it's deserving that Black Lives Matter has some attention right now. It really does. And with all the greatest respect to it, let's focus on that more. Let's keep doing that. Let's figure out how to get rid of bad apples. Because what happened to George Floyd, those aren't bad apples, those are murderers, right? That's just worse than that. How do you look at that term, or how do you react to that when people say, some of those are just some bad apples? Does that get you mad?
It's sad because, some of them are just bad apples. If you turn that around and you say, okay, well, the rioting, it's sending a bad message. Well, it's just some bad apples that are doing things they're not supposed to. Yeah. Do I think there's, prior to me getting into the hospitality, or getting into the hospitality industry in Toronto, I was going through to be a police officer. I think that I would have been, I was going through to, I made it to the final stage of getting onto Metro in Toronto. Mm-hmm. There are bad apples. However, I think you gotta strip it back. The reason why, black people in certain societies are like this is because, and I'm going to get a little bit deep here for a minute.
Oh, I respect that, and I'd like that, so go ahead.
Back in 1865 or 64, when slavery was over, we were given the opportunity to be free. But all we had ever known prior to that was the dependence of our masters, okay?
Yeah.
So now we're free. We are free with no education, we're free with no guidance.
And no money.
And no money. Whereas, back then, the governments were bringing in Europeans and giving them free land and giving them free financial assistance to get themselves free education, teaching them how to farm and do all of that. None of that was done for black people, okay?
Yeah.
So when you generation after generation where you have to figure it out, we were pigeonholed, even though being free, being in a lesser society.
Yeah.
So now you're talking to a guy that believes in persistence, believes in good habits, believes in desire, believes in a faith that I can do anything. But when you come from, and that's from my parents and seeing my father struggling, but when you come from that and you're now in these populations that all you see, like I've had debates with my friends, when all you see is struggle, it's hard to rise above it.
You're getting beaten down.
I think we as a society have to understand that socially it affects us. My kids will have better opportunities than someone that's growing up in the slums because of who I am and the education. So I think that's maybe I went a little bit off tangent.
No, I think it's accurate.
That is where we need to start helping not only black people but native people with the education process and start there and grow from there.
Well, it's funny that you touched on some of that and how deep and how long ago so much of this began. Mm-hmm. After the War of 1812 and the Confederates and, people start to release their slaves. So they brought them over to work. They've enslaved them. Now they're going free, and now they're hating them because they're taking their jobs, right? But they've got to survive too. So what do you expect? They need to blend. They need to do their thing. After World War I, the KKK had a whole resurgence. Even here, that's why there was a hole blown in St. Mary's Church. There was an uprising there, but KKK didn't last very long. But Barrie was never like that. Some people had tried to recruit, and it didn't work out. Barrie didn't like the aggressiveness. Most of Canada didn't like the aggressiveness. KKK was pretty much thrown out of Canada, but that's a whole other history lesson that I'm sure we don't need to have. But it's amazing where little pockets of this hate come from and how quickly it spreads for just like no reason. Like for no reason. There's no reason we are not equal. Mm-hmm. There is no reason we shouldn't have the same opportunities. There is no reason we shouldn't just be a diverse country. It makes us better. It really does. Every bit of culture, every little bit of heritage, every upbringing, everything makes us better, right? So hearing you say that, part of me knows that. Mm-hmm. Part of me knows that you have had these issues. Part of me knows that many black men and black women and black children and black whatever have gone through this. And a lot of people, and as a white man, I'm going to tell you right now that I recognize it and I respect it, and I'm sorry that you've gone through this and that every black person that has had these struggles has gone through this. I'm sorry. And that is, I wish more people would just recognize it and, acknowledge it and go forward. Mm-hmm. Because we should. But if I see one more silly post about how the Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, like I said, right now this is about something that needs to be taken care of, mm-hmm. right? Have you had a lot of people reach out to you, because you were in another article recently too? Have you had a lot of people who have said, "Hey, Rich, what's going on? what's your opinion, and had really, talks about that, white or black.
Yeah, I have. Through Facebook, a few friends from high school connected with me, and one just said, they gave their opinions on the articles and said, wow, you look at me or you speak to me, like I said, I'm not one to hold a grudge or to have a chip on my shoulder, but I have went through things. I think you get used to it.
Yeah.
People have said, reached out and said hello, and just words of encouragement, and yeah, it's been very supporting. And doing that article was difficult for me because even sitting here with you, I'm a pretty private guy. So what we're discussing, mostly I will speak behind closed doors. But I think a voice needs to be heard. I think it's great what you're doing.
It's great what you're doing. And thank you for sharing.
I'm very thankful, for all what I've had, and personally I've had many of downs and I've had ups as well, and so I don't try to use my color as a crutch. I try to just educate myself and be smart and keep moving forward.
And that's a whole other kind of a bizarro topic too, that people will say, let's vote for this person because it's a female. Let's vote for this person because they're black. Good for them. No,
Yeah.
Stop that. If they're the best qualified, they're the best qualified, and that's why somebody's going to get that.
Absolutely.
Let's support, the black actors because they're strong black actors, and not just because they're black. Let's support everybody because they're the best at what they do, right? And I think that's important. But to do the best we can to help anybody who's gone through struggle, maybe a little more, that's a good thing. And we have to stop making it seem like, oh, why do we have to help people? What's wrong with you? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Well, listen, I had an opportunity where for the last 3 years, I've worked back and forth between Canada and Jamaica. My background, I'm half Jamaican, my parents are both Jamaican, and I can speak patois fluently. What has been great over the last 3 years is going back to Jamaica and actually really seeing poverty.
Yeah.
And what we do have here in Canada and the US, we have opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I think having the access to things are not available in smaller countries.
Yeah.
The world is our oyster.
It really is.
We really just have to go out and grab it.
It really is. And I find in the world, some of the things that, world being our oyster, there's this great thing that we have access to that we need to embrace better, and that is information, because information is power. If we educate, it's like people responding right now to the whole Aunt Jemima thing. I love Aunt Jemima. Well, first of all, you're eating crappy syrup, but let's be honest, it's not maple syrup or good Canadian maple syrup.
Yeah.
Here's your problem. You're not looking at the fact as to why this woman is called Aunt Jemima, and that the fact is that's how the smile is looking back at her white master.
Yeah.
That's what that smile is about, right? So you've got this black slave who's not allowed to be called Mrs. Jemima or Miss Jemima. Back then it was so racist they wouldn't acknowledge black people as Mr. and Mrs. It was Aunt and Uncle. Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, right? People don't do the research on that, but they immediately respond with, oh, enough is enough. Can't we stop this? Why do we have to change things?
Yeah.
Because we do. We do have to change things. And part of that change is me getting to sit down and talk to you, people embracing information, and you sharing your message today. So I want to thank you for taking the time to sit with me today, Rich.
No, and thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's the end of the show today, unfortunately.
All right.
But thank you for taking the time.
Thank you once again.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.